and welcome to UC Today. My name is Kieran Delin, and today's topic is the state of AI in 2024 with John Arnold. An incredibly broad topic, but one demanding a holistic overview in my opinion, and I'm delighted to be joined by the man himself, John Arnold, Principal at J Arnold Associates, and an expert voice on AI in business. John, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Kieran, thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Really, that's a nice build-up. So I better say some pretty smart things. So I'm all yours and good to go. And yeah, I mean, like the AI conversations never stop, but there's a lot to talk about. And I think for the readers, it's good to, as you say, have that holistic view because it's so easy to get caught up in the weeds of the details, right?
Absolutely. But before we explode into that holistic overview, I imagine many of our viewers will be familiar with yourself, John. But just as a quick overview cap, can you please tell us about yourself and your journey in the industry?
Oh, sure. Thanks, Karen. So yes, I'm John Arnold, and my company is called J Arnold and Associates. That's a pretty easy one to figure out. So I'm an independent technology analyst, and I've been doing this for about 20 years, so a long time. And most of our viewers here will know about Forrester and Gartner and IDC. So I come from that world. I used to work for one of the big analyst firms. And there's a small tribe of independent analysts like me, and we are very much the independent voices in the industry. So, we are not the ones who do the market forecasts and market share reports and quadrants and all that, but we do provide, as you say, Kieran, that overview, that bigger picture. We talk to all the vendors just like everybody else, and we get a good view of things, and our value is coming to you with independent analysis of what's happening, what the trends are, why they're important, and how you should be thinking about them. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, let's move on to the topic at hand. I think it's interesting to frame it because it's been roughly about 18 months since ChatGPT exploded AI into the mainstream public consciousness. And it is around that same time, obviously, AI has been working for companies from Qualcomm and DeepMind have been working on AI for far longer than that. But since it's really entered the mainstream consciousness is, yeah, roughly about a year and a half. How have you noticed the perception of AI has changed among businesses and enterprises in that time frame? Not just the vendors, but the companies and organizations actually leveraging the technology.
Yeah, so ChatGPT really, as you say, Kieran, was kind of that, I wouldn't quite call it the killer app, but you know what? I think 5 years from now, when we point back to, when was the big bang for AI taking over the world, it's probably going to be GAI, Gen AI, because it's the one thing that people could actually relate to. In other words, the AI we've been doing up till generative AI was the big thing. This is a topic I've been talking about at Enterprise Connect for some time. So the year before last, conversational AI was the big breakthrough in AI, CAI. A lot of acronyms in this space, and those are the advances in AI technology that have made chatbots much more useful than they've been in the past. They've always had a knock for all kinds of reasons, but the newer levels of AI capability has made chatbots much easier to trust and to utilize, and that's what's given rise to things like Copilot in Teams and the kind of this automated virtual assistant that every UCaaS platform seems to have now. You couldn't do it without conversational AI that allows you to kind of like have a discussion with that little, used to be the Clippy in Microsoft that would pop up and really annoy you. Now it's Copilot that's doing that. And it's trying to engage you at every step of the way and say, hey, did you know that Copilot can do this for you? And so it becomes like your own personal secretary. And so that makes AI kind of very easy to relate to because these applications are now something that we kind of control, so to speak, and also we get benefit from. Whereas, like, when it was just ChatGPT, you say, oh, can you make up a Beatles song for me based on what I had for breakfast today? It can do that. But that's a kind of a fun thing. That's the novelty effect, and that kind of wears off after a while. But now you get to, as you said earlier, Kieran, business applications, use cases, like practical things you can do. Yeah, I think it's pretty good. Now I can ask, give your assistant a name and say, hey, I want to get these 5 people on a meeting at 3 o'clock on Tuesday. Can you please set it up for me? And that's all AI applications like this need to know, because they know your calendar, they know your work habits, they know your circle, so they don't have to ask you, oh, which John should I invite? It already knows, because machine learning kind of captures everything, and once it gets it right, it's always right. So there's a lot of efficiencies that come from that, and we're all kind of experimenting. We're on to maybe our second or third dates now with AI, and so far it hasn't let us down. But of course, that can change in a hurry, right? We're all kind of wondering at the back of our heads, how is it going to disappoint me? Right? It's just like life, I suppose. But we're not 100% trusting of it, but we're trusting enough that we, as you say, as end users, are ready to give it a shot, right?
Absolutely, and I think you've touched on actually one of the questions I was going to ask a bit later, where we can dive in now. I think after the Gen AI hype, it feels like vendors, I should specify, they're creating a lot more unique and subtle use cases of AI across UC and collaboration that aren't just purely limited to those AI assistants you alluded to. You see it with versions of camera tracking, with the way that AI can be used to enlighten lighting for videos and things like that in different video conferencing software. All these maybe that you don't immediately think of when you think of a generative AI solution. Do you think maybe all these maybe more singular use cases of AI that seem to be emerging is a sign of almost product maturation after all the initial hype of ChatGPT and Gen AI this time last year?
Yeah, that I'm glad you brought that example up, Karen. So to me, and ultimately, I think for the market, the best use cases of AI are the ones you don't even notice. So when you talk about like auto framing, so there are some higher order video applications, for example, that will automatically adapt in for example, low bandwidth conditions. And it's not just a matter of making more efficient use of the bandwidth, but Cisco example has done a really good job with this. They're actually using AI to infer the missing pieces that are degrading the quality of the video image. So in other words, NVIDIA has been doing this for a few years as well. It just doesn't like brighten the picture. It can actually fill in the image based on what it's actually seeing, and then making kind of virtual representations of the missing pieces that have a high likelihood of being pretty accurate representations of reality. They're not 100%, and if you zoomed into your pixels, you'd see these shortcomings. But in most use cases, you won't even notice. And so you won't even realize that, oh, I'm going on public transit and the train's going into a tunnel. Oh, I'm going to lose connectivity. And in fact, your image kind of maintains the whole way through, because it's adapting, dynamically on the fly, because it's kind of reading the room, right? It knows what's happening and is accommodating. Voice is the same as video as well. You can fill in the missing pieces, but of course it's predictive. AI is not absolute, so it's right most of the time, and you don't even notice it. Of course, when it guesses wrong, it looks ridiculously stupid, but we kind of roll with that as we go. So I think when you don't blare AI here, AI there, because people get sick of it after a while, you just get used to it, and you don't even realize how much AI is helping out. So there's a term, I think, for our viewers to kind of put on your radar for 2025, and that is synthetic data. And that means this is kind of another iteration where AI is going, but the idea that AI is getting good enough now, it can fill in the blanks. It doesn't need real data inputs to create its outputs. it's kind of scary to think this is science fiction stuff, I know, but it's able to infer from the patterns it recognizes from its interactions with you what the missing pieces are likely to be. So, in other words, it can build data sets from synthetic sources that are kind of probabilistic, but are in many cases good enough to help fill out the big picture. I'm getting a little esoteric here, I know, Kieran, but this is kind of the under the covers stuff of where AI is heading to.
No, that sounds fascinating. I was just actually going to ask if you could suggest a practical example of what that might look like, and then somebody's average workday, if they're going to use an AI that had access to synthetic data, what sort of use case could you visualize that being?
Well, sure. So a use case would be, for example, say you're doing a quarterly report for your line of business, and you only have access to the last 2 quarters, and you're trying to get a sense of the trends. Well, AI could extrapolate from earlier reports that may only have partial data about what you're talking about, and can basically infer from a, a smaller set of data what the bigger patterns and trends are likely to be, to say, okay, we think the growth in the next quarter is going to be X percent, and it's basing that growth projection on maybe actuals from the last 2 quarters, but maybe um, a less complete set of data from previous quarters to establish a trend. And the underlying thing I want to kind of amplify from all this, Kieran, is that anything that is generated from AI is almost never based on absolute complete sets of information. Anything it does is based on probabilistic models. It's not telling you what is, it's more like it's what likely is true based on the inputs I have. I mean, that's how we reason in our minds as well, but we know absolutes. That's the difference between AI and humans. That's what knowledge is. You know the difference. AI can't think that well, so it has to make assumptions based on the data points it has. So it's going to keep going down this path, because the underlying idea with all AI, of course, Kieran, is it's data. The more data you can feed into AI, the more you can do with it, the more accurate, the more predictive, the more complete a data set it can generate for you. But it's never going to be 100%. But you know what? Look at mobility. Look at how cell phone reception quality is so bad, but we still put up with it. Right? There's a lot of things we're willing to compromise on. So if it's only 95% accurate, but damn, it works fast and good and doesn't cost us much, we're gonna guess what? We're gonna learn to live with that. And IT is gonna tell you you're gonna have to live with it, because we can't afford to be 100% correct. It's just too expensive. So there's going to be some compromises here, and what our expectations are of getting things right. That's kind of a longer term thing, but I think it's inevitable that that's how it's going to unfold.
Yeah, it's a very exciting time. I think I'm really keen to get your perspective on the different the strategies that from the major vendors. But before we move on to that, we've discussed this tentative acceptance among businesses, or at least some of them, some employees at businesses. I'm quite keen to see some research and surveys about how the extent to which the average worker is leveraging AI at some stage. And we've also touched on another trend, which was the more subtle uses of AI that are becoming, as you say, even more valuable for actually improving collaboration and productivity. And we've had a few major trade shows already in 2024. I was at ISE, and obviously Enterprise Connect was just last month. Are there any, before we move on to business strategies, are there any other general key trends you're seeing from these shows about how AI has evolved?
I think the main one is just that yes, it's evolving, but it's more importantly, it's evolving quickly. And AI, I think more than any other technology, Kieran, that I've ever been around, is moving at a pace that's faster than anything we've seen before. And that's creating a lot of tension, a lot of uncertainty because it's coming at a pace that humans can't adapt to, organizations can't adapt to, and vendors are almost setting impossible expectations that they are trying to meet because everyone's kind of in a race, right? You know, whatever Cisco and Microsoft does, Zoom is going to do next week, and Avaya is going to do, and Mitel's, because they have to. The thing with AI is the change happens so quickly. You don't have these cycles like we used to of 1 or 2 years. Oh, new router is on the market. Oh, you can expect Juniper to react in 6 months. Now that's like 3 lifetimes in AI. So the speed is kind of that, you know, in social media terms, FOMO is a very real thing here. So businesses are afraid of, you know, not adopting AI because their competitors are going to get a head start and they're going to lose ground. And of course, vendors are, you know, it's an existential threat for them because if they don't have an AI story that keeps pace with their competitors, they're going to be out of the game because if you can't do AI well, these days, it doesn't matter how good everything else is about your products. I hate to say it, but that's how dominant AI has become, kind of in the zeitgeist now. It's scary because everything seems to be viewed through a lens of AI, and no one owns it. It's like the internet. You can't see it, you can't touch it, but it's there, and we know it's just going to keep advancing. And you know, off the top, off line, we mentioned the regulations. Invariably that has to come into play, and I think 2024 we're going to start seeing more reality there because it's such a wild west. That's part of the problem. AI can move very quickly, but because it can go in any direction, you got to take the good with the bad. So if it's going to have legs to be around for forever, we've got to make sure we use it in the right ways that give businesses a good ROI and make us feel like we're doing our jobs better, right? And then we embrace it. We don't feel it's a threat. And those things could very easily go off the rails if, you know, the bad guys take over and are doing everything and governments are taking away our freedoms. I mean, it really is that foundational to how it's changing things. And so a lot of things we take for granted kind of pre-AI, you know, they're all on the table now with AI because that's how powerful this stuff is. So it's like, you know, the genie's out of the bottle, and we don't have a power to put it back in, and no one's really knows where it's going to go. So as good as it can be, it's only going to be as good as kind of the guardrails we put in place for responsible, you know, and good use of it. Because it's, you know, you go to areas like medical research, fantastic, right? It can do wonderful things. But in the world of workplace, it can just as easily be used for, you know, deep fakes. You've heard that term, right? For stealing data, impersonating people, all the kind of the things you don't want to see that we don't generally have problems with as humans, but this stuff is just a whole other level.
And I think that's actually raised a point that I would really like to touch on, which is about the legislation side of things. Now, obviously, the EU have introduced a landmark deal or legislation around AI safety at the start of April last week, when at the time of recording, the UK and US also had a landmark agreement about AI safety and research. And this feels like it's the world is very quickly wakening up to and smelling the ashes, as if you will. One of my favourite stories from last year that it took Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning for Joe Biden to to really catch on to the AI's potential transformative impact on our society. But on the face value, this a lot of it is trying to sort of move through the weeds, if you will, of how much is this going to, all this legislation going to tangibly matter? A lot, you know, there's not been too much detail released. There's not been a whole lot of reports with the tangible impact it will have. What is your thoughts on all the agreements that are made so far? And I'm aware that maybe not the too much specifics have been publicised yet. But are you optimistic about what's happening, or do you think it's not as dramatic or radical legislation as you'd like to see?
Well, I'm optimistic that, it's like anything else, like, whatever it is, like a 12-step program. You got to recognize there's a problem first. And then you have to make sure you have the right stakeholders involved who are also seeing a problem and want a better solution. But then this is where the vested interests come into play. So one of the challenges here is that yes, governments can ultimately mandate with the right authority to set some ground rules. Um, One of the big problems here, and certainly in the U.S., is that most forms of modern technology, whether it's internet, mobility, social media, they've all evolved quickly with a very big impact on society in ways that generally the lawmakers don't understand. We've seen this with Facebook, with all the testimonies that they've had to make, and it's clear that a lot of the demographics of the people in power, they're not from the digital generation, and this is a fundamental divide that, in some ways, is going to hinder getting it right, but at least they understand we have to do the right thing, and so we're on the right track, but it's going to take a while to figure out what's going to work best. And one of the reasons for that is, like every wave in our technology world, Karen, there's this kind of like, I don't know, existential tension between innovation and regulation, right? So there's this constant kind of dynamic going where if we have too much regulation, we're going to kill innovation. AI is all about innovation. And this takes us into some uncomfortable territory in the idea that big tech, however you want to define it, but we know who the players are: Google, Microsoft, Amazon. Ultimately, it's really the big cloud players, because cloud is kind of the foundation of AI. We couldn't have AI without cloud. And there's four or five companies that dominate the cloud space, and they have way too much market power. No one can really challenge that because that's the nature of cloud. They are also setting the agenda for AI. And this is when you said earlier about generative AI breaking out into a mass adoption. It's because OpenAI brought it to market, which is Microsoft investment. Big tech companies have the resources and the ways to move these things quickly through the marketplace in ways that small startups couldn't possibly do. They are indispensable for setting the agenda for how these technologies are going to evolve, how much they want to play in the same sandbox as regulators, right? For them, it's all about innovation and time to market, getting things out there quickly, break things, right? Fail fast, all that kind of thing. Well, that's great if you want to. If innovation is your ultimate objective, yes, but there are a lot of hidden costs, unintended consequences, right? Things that come if you have unbridled innovation in terms of these things going wrong. And in the workplace, which is what we care about most here, you start getting to these areas about surveillance technology, right? Do employees really want to be monitored at every step of the way? So, for example, Copilot, not to single out Microsoft, but all the collab vendors have that similar capability, which, yes, can help automate our workflows, make our lives easier, make our days more productive, but at the same time, they're kind of like the digital eyes and ears out there that are able to track every element of everything we're doing, right? So someone somewhere in the organization now knows how many meetings I'm attending, what I said in those meetings, how long my calls have been, what I've been writing about, who I've been communicating with, all of these things that in an instant can be pulled up by AI and profiles generated of this is what a productive employee looks like, right? This is what an unproductive employee looks like. And all of a sudden, our performance, metrics and expectations are going to be set by how well we fit those profiles. Because ultimately, it's all about efficiency and outputs. And so, the more metrics you have to measure that, that's what decision makers kind of live and die by. So this layer of AI, right, is providing the feedstock to allow people, organizations to kind of determine what does good performance look like, right? And so, like, but where are those human elements? When I look at you and I smile a certain way, can AI really interpret that as being a positive, sentiment as opposed to a sarcastic one, right? I mean, is it going to read all those cues right? This is the scary stuff, right? Well, I may have said that, but that wasn't what I meant. If you listen to the tone of my voice, or right, you've got an Irish accent, right? So maybe it didn't quite catch what you said accurately, didn't get the dialect or the slang right. Wow, you just go down those paths and you say, well, okay, there's a lot of potholes here, right?
Absolutely, and context is absolutely key as well. For all, as you say, there might be that extra level of data I can to latch onto. You don't The nuances of context will always be a really tricky thing, no matter how advanced I can get to. I'm moving on to the vendors themselves. I'm absolutely fascinated by how Microsoft, Google, Zoom, and Cisco this time last year they all had different types of AI across their different services and products, but now all of them have essentially one flagship AI solution that they really highlight as being embedded across pretty much at least the vast majority of their solutions, if not all of them, whether that's Copilot, Gemini, AI Companion, or AI Assistant. This might touch on your answer a few questions back about just feeling the FOMO of being left behind in AI. But why do you think this is the strategy for so many of the big players in the AI space?
Well, one element of this is that they do it because they can. Because AI is so new, in marketing, from a marketing lens, AI has very high perceived value. Anytime you say something is AI, I think people kind of they say, ooh, it must be special, it must be smart, it must be, it must be better than what we've had before. I mean, I think that's a kind of naive way to think about things, but the vendors can generally, if you call it AI or you refer to it that way, it kind of infers that it's an advanced solution, it's state of the art, leading edge, all of that stuff. Interestingly, though, they're not monetizing it. Like, normally that would give you license to charge more because its perceived value is high. But right now, I think, Microsoft is the only one I think that's charging right out of the box, the $30 a month, you know, fee, which they view as a very reasonable thing to do. But the other vendors, of course, it's an opportunity to say, oh, we'll give it away for free. Why don't you try ours? Again, there's a FOMO thing. I mean, Microsoft is kind of the front runner because their market position with UCAS is so strong with Teams. So it's kind of like you've got to at least follow the leader to kind of keep mindshare high out there. Because if you're not doing what Microsoft is doing, then you're not going to be on most people's radar for very long. So there is that element to it. So they do it because they can. The proof is always in the pudding, right? Well, how good is your AI assistant compared to their AI assistant? We don't really have definitive metrics about that yet, and I think that's where I think it's good ground for doing more research out there about what the actual experiences have been. I'm sure there are lots of test labs that will do head-to-head comparisons about translation accuracy and video quality and a lot of it is anecdotal. Like when you get meeting summaries from a call that you haven't been on, and you look at the notes, and then you say, I want to compare it to someone who's actually in the meeting, and let them tell me if it's about on target or not. We need to see a little bit more of that, but I think ultimately that proof is going to be pretty subjective. It's a question of, well, how will people feel about it as opposed to how good it actually is. So that remains to be seen. But the with all of the big vendors kind of having to keep pace with each other, I think those are just the table stakes now. What I worry about, of course, is that because everyone seems to be so obsessed with AI, not everything needs to be AI. Not every feature has to be intelligent. I just hope that that doesn't come at the expense of getting all the other pieces right that are just more to do about good engineering, right? And just good problem solving and good integrations, that kind of thing. And ultimately, because nobody has all of the pieces, and anyone will tell you that AI really depends on good integrations with other applications, because what it does, it's like a bit of a vacuum cleaner, right? It sucks up data from all kinds of places. So, in the contact center, it's going to pull it from CRM, it's going to pull it from UCAS, it's going to pull it from sales records, it's going to pull it from the agent KPIs. Many sources it has to draw from. So we call that omni-channel in the contact center, kind of on one level. But if those integrations aren't good, then the quality won't be there. So for a vendor to say, "Hey, use our AI," if I'm a buyer, you've got to get under the covers with that and say, "Okay, show me what your integrations look like. These are the 5 applications that my business runs on. How well does it pull from all of these?" That would, to me, would be the criteria to look at, to say, okay, well, the AI might be great, but if it's a crappy integration with my Office or my Google Suite, then it's not going to be much use to me,
And
right?
one
And so
final question.
there, it's like,
Sorry.
and like, does Microsoft want to play with Google? This is where it gets in again. Big tech is part of this story because they all have their territories to protect. They all want to be number one. And so, okay, why should Google want to play nice with Microsoft? They don't want to. They kind of have to. But you know what I'm saying? That's kind of like there's only so much you can push these vendors to do things. Now, the regulations go further with this. As you recall, Microsoft had to unbundle, right? Teams with Office, right? Again, because their market power is so strong, and I keep coming back to this because I really think even for buyers, you've got to have that in your thinking about how much power do we really want to be giving big tech. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I don't have to go with Google for everything. Maybe I should use some of the smaller vendors who I'll feel more comfortable with. There is an element of that too. It's big in the EU because they're worried that their ecosystem is getting snuffed out because their local players aren't getting any oxygen because Microsoft and Google and Amazon and everybody else they have all the levers, and that can be that's anti-competitive. That's how it keeps the others out. And in the EU, they have their own ecosystem of tech players, so they need to protect that.
Perfect. Well, I think one final question before I let you go, John. You alluded earlier, you gave one big AI prediction for 2025 and beyond. I was wondering whether you have any others that you feel is going to be a real trend or development in AI, either over the next 12 months, but even over the next 5, 10 years, that you think will be absolutely seismic in the space.
Hmm. Seismic is hard to predict. Like right now, these changes we're living with right now are so foundational. It's hard to see where like what's going to come after this. But what I would say is we are getting closer to, in science fiction terms, it's this concept called the singularity, right? Where man and machine are basically one. And I don't want to sound too kind of dreary about it, but that's where AI is eventually trying to take us. So when we talk about, I talked earlier about synthetic data. Well, building towards this is this concept called digital twins. So when you talk about a seismic change, it will be the ability to for each of us to have our own. A bot isn't the right word for it, but a digital twin, literally a virtual version of us that kind of knows enough about our preferences, our the people we work with, what we know, what we say, that will allow us to almost have simultaneous multiple presences in more than one place. So the biggest thing for anyone attending a conference, I can only go to one session at a time. why don't I send my digital twin to this session? I'll attend this session myself and we'll compare notes after. We're not that far away from that kind of reality coming, where we could even have multiple twins. They could all have different personas. One deals with my boss, one deals with my team members, right? Going up, managing down, all that kind of thing. That could be very fascinating evolution to the workforce. I don't think we're that far off from that.
Well, that's a simultaneously fascinating, terrifying, and thrilling vision for the future, and in that way,
All in
it's
one.
nice. It's a nice, nicely summarizes AI quite quite astutely in a way. Yeah, thank you so much for being here, John. I've really enjoyed today's session. It's been a pleasure to discuss AI with you.
Oh, you're welcome, Kieran. This is fun, and yeah, I enjoy it. And thanks all for listening. Let's just say we started with UCAS, and now that sounds pretty boring compared to where all this other stuff is going.
Absolutely. And if you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share on social media, and we'll see you next time. I've been Kieran Delin today. Thanks for watching.